Good morning, and I want to welcome you all to MC Podcast, episode 16. My co-host today in studio is Lyn Crabtree.
Morning, Mark.
Good morning. Hey, welcome. Lyn is the president of Master's Choice, and to be honest with you, he is one of my favorite co-hosts. That's the truth, because it seems like when you and I get to talking, we could just ramble on for a while. We have lots in common. We have similar thoughts about things, similar kind of backgrounds and ideas, and so I'm glad that you are here. So, Lyn, just kind of give us an update on what's going on at Master's Choice at the moment.
We are crazy busy right now. You know, you'd think that you're kind of getting to the end of crops in the ground and all that, and production corn is in the ground. It's up. It's doing well. Nurseries and plots and those kind of things are all kind of wrapped up and doing well. Side dressing is pretty much complete. I mean, you know, we had a lot of moisture early, as you know, and risk of losing some nitrogen. That's almost all up, going well. But my goodness, we got so many other things going on. I mean, we've got a rather large nursery expansion going on in southern Illinois, and putting together like a 15-acre nursery where we're putting in stationary pivot heads. So we've been working all that to try to keep up with that, so we could get that nursery planted. And it's up, it's doing well, but we're putting finishing touches on that. I think the guys are mounting a 20-horse pump out there right now. We got 3-phase power coming into that currently. We're leveling a lot of ground. We've got 3 new greenhouses going up. We can run a series of 3 greenhouses off of a single computer system, okay. And so we've got another series of 3 greenhouses going up there. So they don't even have the land leveled for that, and we've got to start construction here surely by the beginning of next month. To have those ready for this fall. There's just a lot of things going on with a couple of the support divisions. We're putting in a new conditioning line, which will be the 3rd line that'll be intact down at the Pulaski plant. We've expanded the facilities down there for isolation, where returns all come in. We're building new storage down there right now. They're pouring the concrete for that right down there right now, and constructing the 3rd line. And our guys, we don't contract that out, which is kind of unique for anybody that's toured our facility. They know that our crew are pretty accomplished and universal group, and the equipment that they run our corn through, those lines. They have assembled them. They've constructed them. They've actually engineered them from the ground up, and so they're in the midst of that. It's just crazy busy with spraying and keeping up with stuff right now. So it's just, I don't know. I was busy all weekend running around trying to get things ready for this week and looking at my schedule, and it's nuts.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no doubt. Yeah. I had to send out an email last week. There's some time to go south to look at some crops, and basically sent an email and said, look, I've got this date, and this date. You pick which one works for you, because any other time I'm not going to be able to run down and look at these. So definitely getting crazy busy. So, you know, Lyn, you and I, we've talked a lot about things in the past, and, you know, you and I, we have a similar kind of interest. We like cows. I think sometimes maybe we like cows more than we like people. Maybe, yeah. But you know, we have kind of this, you know, nutrition kind of background and thought process and all of these things. And so today, I just really kind of want to talk about the idea that sometimes we, you know, I think you said it in the past, that, you know, we can really focus really heavily on lactation diets. You know, the lactating cow diet, we can spend time and energy and effort, and we can talk about making high quality forages for those so we get the most productivity out of them. And it seems to me that a lot of times we give the calves, the heifers, and the DryCows kind of the back seat there, and don't really pay much attention to them. You know, so what are the dangers in doing that? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, you know the old adage, you know, we make forage and it doesn't go up just right. Well, that's dry cow feed, you know.
Exactly.
There's a lot more that goes into it than that. But I think that we kind of examine where this whole thing, this whole philosophy comes from, and we'll begin to understand exactly why we have some of the problems that we have. So when we're looking at the milk tank and we're looking at pickup every day, you know, we know what our lactating herd's doing. And then we're out there and we're in the midst of forages changing, a little bit, weather changes, some of those kind of things. And so we're on the hot seat a little bit about making sure that milk cow diet, that milk cow rations are currently balanced and doing well, because we see the immediate return in the milk that's picked up every day.
And we need to see that. I mean, we need to focus on that, and that's not an area that we need to shun by any means. And I would never want it to sound like that. That is an important diet, and we must have that to put milk in the tank, no doubt. But
it's not the only thing.
Right.
And it's not the only diet that we need to be looking at. And so I think that as we're beginning to look at our calves, at our heifer development, we have to have that heifer that we're going to be able to breed on time, that's going to be ready, and is in a positive energy position, so that she's going to stick, and so that we've got our timetable down correctly, so that we're freshening that heifer, let's say a black and white, that we want to freshen at 22 to 24 months. And she has got the frame build to be able to sustain the draw on her lactation, as well as the body condition that's gonna be required to maintain keep us from pulling too much flesh off of her back,
For sure.
and then fall into that sophomore slump. So it's not just that we have heifers that are productive when they come into the herd, but it's that we can keep them in flesh, so that as we get them bred back, they're in condition to have a great second season, rather than that soft second season that too many times we're familiar with.
Yep.
And so, the way that we do that is to get that calf off to an incredibly good start, and then maintain some consistency throughout that 2-year development process, so that we manage the gains. And Mark, too much of the time we don't focus on what it takes to be able to put together those kind of diets to get, let's say, a black and white, we want to gain it 2.25 pounds a day.
Right.
You know? And if we don't look at that diet and manage for that, and we're just feeding them, this is just heifer or dry cow feed, we don't really know where we're at.
We don't know where we're at if we're not paying attention to those. I was on a farm in Kansas last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. But anyway, they were doing a superb job. They were doing a superb job of had heifers in great condition. Their calves were in great condition. But I think one of the things that sometimes one of the places that a lot of times we just take for granted, I think is the best word, is with calf starters. We want these calves to transition from basically liquid diet to a solid diet, and there are ways that we can help promote that. But I think sometimes we just get into this mindset and into this kind of treadmill thing of, well, I'm just going to get my calf starter from the guy that I've always got it from, and we really don't pay attention to what's in that. Well, we know that South Dakota State did a study a couple of years ago that really showed that making changes in that calf starter can really make changes in those calves. We had South Dakota State took some flowery type corn, some softer endosperm type corn, just replaced the corn in that diet, and those calves gained at a faster rate. But not only that, some of the most interesting things about that is that, okay, so we want them to gain, we want them to grow, we want them to be that. But there was this dynamic going on there where the rumen was developing faster. Okay, and so we had greater papillae growth in there that really equated to greater fiber digestibility. When they looked at those calves and they looked at the manure, there was at the same time as the calves that had the flowery type grain in their calf starter versus those who did not, there was a greater fiber digestibility going on. The fiber was more digested when they took manure samples. But one of the most interesting things is they were absorbing more minerals.
Absolutely,
they were absorbing more minerals.
Cell development, man. We're when they were looking at those fecal samples and they were analyzing those, there was a significant difference in the amount of absorption that was going on with the mineralization in that feed. And of course, like you said, they were identical. The starters were identical. The only thing they did was change the corn.
Yep.
That was a portion of that calf starter's composition.
A small portion.
And it wasn't a big portion, but it was a dynamic difference there in that. And so when we're looking at that, the mineral absorption, we're looking at cell and tissue development of that heifer, and how much greater that was. And of course, it showed up at the end of the study. They were heavy. They were heavier calves,
heavier, a little larger frame.
Yeah.
Yep.
But just ready to really take off. And I know that one study that you have talked to me about in the past was a study that wasn't it Mike Van Amberg at Cornell?
Yep.
That was doing about the start that you got a heifer off to and how that equated on the finished end, and that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Right.
In terms of we got to condition that heifer, we got to develop that heifer, and that's an ongoing process and a very integral part of the process, so that we get that heifer that maximizes the production in that tank, which we're keeping an eye on.
Absolutely. So starting them off, actually, they don't just look good, and they don't just breed off well, but actually that first lactation is a higher level of milk production in that first lactation, just by starting these calves off right and doing that and taking care of them and watching out for them. You said it earlier. I think sometimes the adage in the dairy industry is, oh, this is lower quality hay, that's heifer hay, that's dry cow hay. But really, we need to be making high quality hay. We need to be making high quality feedstuffs for those guys also.
It's not just that we need to. I mean, if we wanted to push the highest quality feedstuffs to a heifer, we'd easily top 3 pound a day, maybe 4 pounds a day in terms of gain. But we can't do that because we have to develop a frame that's going to be good for longevity. Now we have to put the condition on that frame that's going to manage it too. But sometimes I think we haphazardly just hope that we are developing a heifer, that's going to be good for the long haul, and that's that 2-year process. And some of us. Contract that out without a great deal of thought. I mean, we realize we're getting our bred heifer back to us in a certain period of time, but is that frame fully developed? Have we reached a level of maturity with that frame, and is that in focus? Is that in mind? When we're putting gains together, when we're putting diets together, and is she in the kind of flesh that she can peak higher and actually hold that milk curve? Like a cow that's out in her 3rd, 4th, 5th lactation can. Right. And no, that heifer isn't going to be, in terms of production, what that cow is, but in relative terms, can she hold that lactation as long as some of those cows?
And that really starts with building that foundation and bringing her through that whole feed process.
Exactly.
So I think it's interesting to me and kind of amazing that going back to that lactation cow diet, I mean, we want to pull in a nutritionist who's going to help us make milk, but I wonder how many guys actually pull in a nutritionist to feed heifers and dry cows.
Absolutely, and it's critically important. I think that we manage that and keep those gains on a consistent basis, and that's the way that we're going to manage that frame growth that we're looking for.
Absolutely. Now, so then we kind of one of the other areas that we seem to kind of neglect there is dry cows.
You bet.
I mean, and there's a lot of times that we just seem to, well, I'll just feed her enough to keep her going, kind of mentality. I'll feed her enough, just to kind of get her back. And it's that same balancing game. I want her to gain some condition back. I mean, we've been milking her for 300 plus days. We've been milking her. Everything that she's been eating has pretty much so been going into milk production without milking off her back too much. But now we need a time where she's going to not only develop a calf, all right? So she's got time where she's developing this calf that's inside of her. So we got to give her enough to do that, and a little bit more to get her a little condition back. We don't want to over condition our dry cows, but get her a little condition back so that she's ready. So that she's ready to do that. So what are some hints and tips and things that you can see of with feeding dry cows?
Well, most of us, herd size anymore is large enough where we can have at least 2 groups of dry cows, where we can have a close-up group, and we have a far-out group, and that's a huge help because that far-off group, we're more conditioning the rumen, reconditioning the rumen. A lot of times we've got a pretty hot diet going into those cows, even at the tail end of lactation when we're drying them off. It's not unusual to be drying off pretty productive cows, or trying to get them into that necessary dry period. But you want them in kind of their working clothes. You want them to have been doing well. You don't want them over conditioned on the milk line and underproducing. For you in the tank, that's not efficient utilization. So we don't want that cow. But we want her with her working clothes on. Want to bring her back in. We want to recondition that rumen. We want to relift that villi on the rumen. So we want some long stem scratch in there. We want something that's gonna really get in there and kind of curry the inside of that rumen and get it back in condition. So for a lot of us, we're looking at some dry hay. I've heard it said for years, that corn silage is taboo for heifers under 500 pounds and for dry cows. That's not true.
No.
I mean, it doesn't. There's no bearing there, but there are some other restrictions that go into play, and without getting into a lengthy discussion on cation, anion exchange rates,
right,
we can simply say that we've got some mineral imbalances that often take place in a dry cow, which causes a lot of metabolic problems when we freshen.
Right.
So a lot of us have just accepted the fact that we're flushing cows with calcium when they fresh.
Yeah.
And maybe a lot of that is an improperly balanced dry cow diet. And maybe not, but a lot of times it is. And so, for dry cow feed, I'm not looking for that lowest in energy or something that's been put up, that's been rained on or whatever. And it's not that we don't have to use those forages. I understand.
Yeah, we've got to use those. We've made them. We've spent time and energy and money making them, but I think sometimes just using them without really balancing with other things is very costly.
Critical, absolutely critical, and so important to that cow hitting the hitting the string, freshening and hitting the string and taking off, as opposed to getting her off to a bad start and then trying to play catch up. It's no different than than we kind of stress the importance of getting the calf off to a great start, and in building off of that, we got to do the same thing with our dry cows, and that's just such a critical time.
One of the things we need to watch is potassium. We need to watch potassium in
absolutely.
Hay. Yeah,
I always liked Timothy and orchard grass hay. Timothy is something that Grandpa used to put up years ago. Timothy is cheap to seed. It's a relatively strong crop. It's people think it's a once and done crop, because it puts off a big first cutting and then can't cut it back. But really the growth points on Timothy are so high that most of us just cut too low, so we kill our Timothy, or at least for the season.
Right.
But Timothy was really good choice as a combination in some hays. Low potassium was the thing. Orchard grass was, not too far behind it, but some of these other grasses like ryegrass could be
brome?
Particularly high. Not bad.
Yeah.
Typically not bad. I mean, mineralization in our soils are going to have a lot to do with that mineral content in the hay, but for the most part, not bad.
Not bad.
But we can put together some pretty good diets with corn silage and some dry hay and accomplish the goal, of that dry cow diet, but based off of the body condition of that group as a whole, our energy values have to be controlled as well, because we're not shucking the same kind of energy values into our dry cows as we were them at the tail end of lactation.
Exactly. And then I think your point, just to kind of reiterate it, that I hope people didn't miss, that reconditioning of the rumen for that dry cow is of utmost importance. Mm-hmm. We have been. I think I heard a guy say one time, we treat our lactating cows like race cars. We want to rev them up as high as we can without blowing up the engine, and we need to. That's where we are. We need to do that, especially at $15 milk where we are, today. Things we've got to have high productivity out of them, but we also got to give them time to kind of come back off of that. Let's recondition that. Let's get that back. Put a little longer stem in there. Re-scratch that. And I just think that sometimes we forget about her there. We're gonna bring a race car in after a race, and we're not gonna make it run every day like it has been. We're gonna go in. We're gonna maintenance it. gonna make sure that everything's doing right. We kind of got to do that same thing with the cow and be able to do that.
Pull that girl off the line. Give her that 60 days. Regardless of what she's doing, pull her and give her 60-day period. And then obviously, if we can, and many people are doing that today. 2 groups. We got a step up group. A warm up group of dry cows where we're really kind of preparing them for the diet for the fuel that a race car is going to get.
Exactly. You're exactly right. We're going to go up and kind of warm her up. It's exactly what that close up diet is supposed to do. And she's getting ready to calve. She's got to have energy to do all of that, and then she's got to have energy to make milk, and while minimizing a lot of those metabolic issues that can happen there. And so I think sometimes we a lot of times we look at those as kind of second class citizens. Those dry cows, those heifers, as kind of second class citizens. They're not the gals that are really getting it done. But if we don't take care of them, they won't be the gals who get it done in the milking part.
That's the future. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. And just I think some small changes in those diets. And maybe it is bringing a nutritionist in. And maybe it is feeding a little bit better quality hay. Maybe it is feeding a little bit of corn silage. But really managing and thinking about how we're managing that, instead of just kind of treating them
money well spent paying our nutritionists to do our dry cow and our heifer diets.
No doubt about it. And then how many times have you and I been on a farm and it's the kids who are feeding the heifers and the dry cows, and just not that they can't. That's not what I'm saying, but a lot of times 16, 17-year-old boy doesn't have I'll just throw some of this in, so throw some of that in, and not really he's got something else on his mind, right? If it ain't football, it's baseball. If it ain't baseball, it's basketball. If it ain't sports, it's girls, right? And not the girls that he's feeding, but the girls that are running around, the 2-legged girls running around the neighborhood, and and so just managing and thinking through these things a lot of times will go a long way into being able to do that.
I learned a long time ago that there was the diet that the nutritionist formulated, that it was the diet that the farmer put out there, and then it was the diet that the cows ate.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times some of our heifers are pre-fresh heifers are getting lumped in with our dry cows, and a more mature cow is going to get to the bunk, and let's just say that we're is a lot of silage and some grain mix and then some dry hay that's in the TMR that's on that bunk, and she can sort through there pretty quickly, and she can get the grain and the silage out and leave the hay for the heifer. So the 2 totally different diets that they're getting coming off of the same bunk, and sometimes bunk management helps take care of some of that. So there's a lot of factors.
Yeah, bunk management, pins, pinning those off different, feeding for all of those things. You talked a minute ago about here we have these cows that are coming off, that we're bringing them off of their lactating diet, but how many times the diet that they're actually getting, even at the end of lactation, depending on the size of the farm and everything, a lot of times it's the same diet, because we're kind of feeding for that average cow in the herd. It's the same diet that we're feeding for that high producing cow, and and so she does need to come off, and she does need that time to prepare. So so Lyn, actually, we've been talking about high quality hay. We've been talking about feeding these calves right, feeding the heifers right, feeding the dry cows right. We're gonna call in Josh Baker. Josh Baker works for King's Agriseeds South, and he's just gonna kind of give us an idea of some tips on making hay, especially in the Southeast. He's down in Georgia, and we're already, I think, a lot of guys in the Midwest and a little bit north of us are just at first cutting. It'd be interesting to see exactly where they are in some of their cutting. So we're gonna call in Josh Baker to just talk about making hay.
Good.
Hey, Josh, glad to have you on today. I appreciate you taking time to talk to us. Lyn and I, we've kind of been talking about calf starter diets or calf diets and heifer diets and dry cow diets. Wanted to call you in and just let you talk a little bit about making hay, making good quality hay. But before you do that, just wanna kind of introduce yourself and just kind of tell us exactly your role with King's Agriseed Southeast, and just kind of what's going on with you down there?
Sure. So this is my name's Josh Baker. Like Mark said, I'm the general manager of Southeast Agriseeds, and also work closely with our sister company, King's Agriseeds, in the northeast. So Southeast is positioned in northwest Georgia, and our number one goal is to promote better forage production. A lot of producers are running into challenges from an economical standpoint with poor forages. So that is our goal to help increase overall quality. So
Good. Good. So,
yep.
so you're down there in northeast Georgia, but you have a territory that's all over down there. What kind of challenges are guys having making hay down there?
So this year is challenging because of moisture. Rainfall. We're getting excess rainfall right now. It's really hard to make quality forages. It's really hard because of the timing. Despite the fact that we want to cut a forage at a certain time. If it rains us out, we can delay by a week or two, and by the time our ground gets dry, we may have lost some quality there. That's one of the biggest challenges this year. I'd say a conceptual challenge or an overall challenge would be what is quality,
Yeah.
and when do we need to start thinking about quality, and that's when we plant. At planting time, whatever seed you're planting, that's when you need to start thinking about that quality and have a good idea of when to harvest. I know a lot of times I get phone calls when small grain forages are already headed out, and they say,
Yeah.
"Hey, when should I harvest it?"
About 2 weeks ago.
Should have been 2 weeks ago. So it's a good cover crop. Burn it down, and we'll try again next year. No.
Yeah.
But that's sometimes
Or harvest it and feed it to your heifers. It'll be okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what a lot of guys say. Well, I can feed it to something.
Yeah.
Something will eat it, and
Yeah.
so that's probably the largest challenge is the concept of quality and how to focus on that and really dial it in.
And so when you talk about quality, Josh, what parameters are you thinking? I mean, are we just talking protein? Are we talking energy? I mean, what are you talking about when you say, oh, it needs to be good quality?
So I think for years, protein has been the comment or the what we fixated on in terms of quality, and
Yeah.
Everybody sort of drove that concept home, and as of late, we're talking a lot more about fiber digestibility and energy,
Sure.
because protein, and especially in a heifer diet, is rarely a strong limiting factor. So we do need to, if we can increase the energy values of that forage through fiber digestibility, that's a really good diet. It can create a really good diet for a heifer, and help that rumen function, really help her get started right.
Okay. So you were talking, it starts with planting, and you talked a little bit about harvest timing and those things. So down where you are, what forages, what grasses, legumes, what kind of what kind of seed, for lack of better terms, are you finding the best quality out of? Is it a certain type of grass, a certain type of clover, a mixture of both?
So, it varies because it really does come down to management. I mean, I can make really good quality fescue, but that's not going to be in July.
Right.
It's not going to be July 4th fescue. If I cut that fescue early May, maybe even a little bit earlier if I'm making some baleage, then I can make good quality out of fescue. Orchard grass, same way. Our perennial crops make good hay as long as they're timed correctly. Small grains, I think, are the biggest lost potential, I guess, because we do let those get so late.
Okay.
Before we harvest them. So we're looking at that flag leaf stage on a good small grain. That's a really good forage. for that classification of animal.
Yeah, because you're maximizing. We talk about it. You're maximizing protein there. I think you can lose
Right.
half of your protein just in a week if we let that thing go to head. So we are talking protein there, but we're also talking sugars and fiber digestibility when it's in that flag leaf stage.
Absolutely.
And so
and we like triticale, we like that because it has that longer harvest window, and I think we've done a good job promoting that and getting guys excited about it. It's a really hot forage item right now in the Southeast, especially, but the challenge with that is because a lot of producers think that, well, it's got a longer harvest window. It's almost like they want to be a little more relaxed about that. But we still do lose quality, just not as much quality with that forage. So we're still targeting that flag leaf stage.
So I know we've been talking about hay, but when you said triticale, it kind of sparked a thought in my mind. Are guys down in the Southeast, are they putting any stalkers on those? Because there's a lot of beef down there. Are they putting any stalkers on that over winter, or is it just
Sure.
mainly gray for hay?
Yeah, there are a lot of folks grazing, a lot of stocker cattle, and actually in terms of dairy heifer development as well. I've got a lot of guys that graze winter annual forages for their dairy cattle. They're dairy heifers, and I work with guys in Northeast Georgia that are raising heifers for the North Florida dairies.
Okay,
and they do a really good job dialing in their forage program in terms of grazing. Now we default to ryegrass. We always want to default to ryegrass, but what I found is that the optimum window for the intersection of yield and quality and ryegrass is pretty short.
Yes.
Because it does mature. And once it matures, it's one of the worst in terms of getting not only indigestible, but also almost unpalatable. I mean, it's just not a desirable forage anymore. So I think spreading the windows out, with some of these diverse small grain forages, adding some clovers, getting that started a little bit earlier in the fall, maybe with some spring forage oats or something like that. That's really the focus of our cheap feed or our economical feed. That's when we're going to produce that for our heifers.
No doubt. So just to kind of we'll jump off this in a second, but just so you got heifers or stockers that are grazing. When does a guy need to think about pulling them off in the spring to be able to let that crop kind of recuperate and mature so that we can go in and cut that for hay? What's your kind of gut thought there? Your kind of blanket rule of thumb.
That's a great question. So it depends on the area. Of course, there is some variance there, but you really need to pull them off earlier in the winter to allow that to get that spring green up. So a lot of guys unfortunately don't catch it until after spring green up. They see it greening up and then they pull the cattle off. And instead, you should. There's not really a visual marker. You just have to sort of think about it and know that the weather's going to break. And when we get green up on those small grains or ryegrass, whatever it is, we need to go out there and hit it with some nitrogen and really, really make it explode and get some good forage out of that for haylage or baleage. So I guess I'll say that it really does vary, but typically it's sooner than what we would normally think. It's sooner than green up. I'll say that. I need to go ahead. So I personally, I'm grazing some stockpiled, some fescue, some late season fescue, and then I go straight into my winter annual. After Christmas, I'm usually bringing the cattle off of that winter annual to let it rest through January, February. Then in March, my weather breaks, and I can start to really get some good forage growth out of that if I'm planning to harvest.
That makes sense. All right. So kind of to wrap this whole thing up, we've been talking about good quality hay and just kind of making that and just some thoughts. Give me your top three techniques or managements or your top 3 points for making good quality hay.
timeliness. Give me 4. So
I'll give you 4. I'll give you 4.
Two of those will be timeliness.
Okay.
One would be selection. Varietal selection is huge. There is a huge variance in the products that are available for forage. And then the other one would probably be timeliness again, I guess.
Okay.
I'd have to say, but timeliness is really important, and we're talking about that in terms of maturity and quality. We really do need to focus on that and make sure that's what we're doing. So those would be very important, and I talk about those a lot. And I know the seasons can be challenging, but still, we need to try to get those forages in as soon as they're ready.
Absolutely.
Quality.
No doubt. Hey, Josh, thanks for calling in. Hope that everything's going well with you and your family. We appreciate your time, and so we'll let you get back to it. So thanks for calling, buddy.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care. Hey, we want to thank Lyn Crabtree for joining us again, and Josh Baker for taking his time to join us today for MC Podcast, episode 16. And so we appreciate you guys out there who are listening to us. And remember always that we are social: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and always you can find us at seedcorn.com. Y'all have a great day. Thanks for joining.